Once home to the printing presses for the Daily Express and Daily Telegraph, the West Ferry printers site in London's Docklands is at the centre of cash for favours allegations, which have forced the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, to publish details of his contacts with the developer, former Express newspapers owner Richard Desmond, after they met at a Tory dinner. The disclosure that Mr Desmond gave the Conservative Party £12,000 2 weeks after Mr Jenrick approved the £1 billion scheme to build 1,500 flats on the 15-acre site prompted Labour to demand in a Commons debate publication of all correspondence, texts and emails about the development. The minister said he'd release all relevant information.
These documents show, contrary to the wild accusations and the baseless innuendo propagated by the honourable gentleman opposite and restated today in a series of totally inaccurate statements and comments, this was a decision taken with an open mind on the merits of the case.
Mr Jenrick says the dinner was the first time he'd met Mr Desmond, who had invited him on a site visit, then sent him a number of text messages and tried to contact him by phone. On reflection, he would not have exchanged numbers, he wrote. But in a cordial text to Mr Desmond on the evening of the dinner, November the 18th last year, Mr Jenrick said, "Good to spend time with you tonight, Richard. See you again soon, I hope." Mr Desmond replied, "Thanks, Robert. I really appreciate your text. We'll call your office tomorrow to arrange. Very best." But by December 23rd, Mr Desmond appeared impatient, texting, "We've got to get the approval before January the 14th. Otherwise, payment of £45 million to Tower Hamlets, meaning we have to stop and reduce social housing." And on January the 9th this year, one Housing Department official emailed another saying, "On timing, my understanding is that the Secretary of State is or was insistent that decision issued this week, i.e. tomorrow, as next week the viability of the scheme is impacted by a change in the London regime."
Far from closing down the conversation with Mr Desmond, Mr Jenrick initiated a conversation with him the very next morning by text. And it's clear from the documents that Mr Jenrick rushed through this decision on the 14th of January deliberately so he could help Mr Desmond avoid paying £30 to £50 million in tax.
But the government is closing ranks around Mr Jenrick over the West Ferry scheme. Cabinet Secretary Sir Mark Sedwill says the Prime Minister considers the matter is closed. John Craig, Sky News.